All right, so this is going to be our first topic, looking at some of the more advanced tools for creating features for the CSWP exam. And really the things that we're looking at mostly for CSWP are things over kind of on this section here, where we have ribs, wraps, drafts, intersections, shells, and mirrors. In CSWA, you tend to see mostly your boss extrude revolves, your extrude cuts, your hole wizards, and those kind of derivatives. The swept boss base, you might see a little bit, usually lofts and things like that. Those are more on like the surface modeling exams. And so you're probably not going to see those on even CSWP. So the ones you want to make sure you're familiar with is all these tools over here, in addition to all of your base tools. So let's just go through each of those kind of one by one and what the different options are. This is a part that I made from a previous video, and that'll be posted on Canvas as well. So if you want to play with that, you can. I'm going to hide the floating mean controls. The first thing is the rib tool. The rib tool is super useful whenever you need to fill in components to reinforce them, usually on injection molded parts, but it can also be done on CNC milled parts. And all you need to remember is I need to draw where the rib starts. And the rib does not need to start on the exterior of the face. So most of the time when you're drawing the rib, what you're going to draw is you're going to start on the exterior sketch, and you're going to draw a line that kind of crosses the part in some way. And then you're going to go into your rib and you're going to accept that. And you're going to say, okay, I want this to thicken kind of in that direction. Let me make it a little thicker so you can see it better. So you can see how that's thickening the line in that direction. I do have to specify which direction I'm going. So that's not going to work because that's not a rib. That'd be like a shelf or something. Which you could use if that was in the middle of the part, but since it's on the top of the part, that's not going to work, right? So I make sure I'm going in the right direction, and then that's really all you need to do is specify the thickness and the direction and the line, and you've got a rib. It's important to note that that line does not actually need to cross the entire area. All you have to do is specify kind of where the line is. So inside here, I don't have to have this come all the way to the end. I can have it actually be totally in the middle of my part. I didn't want that relation there. And it will still project that line out to the edge of the face. So depending on what kind of geometry you're doing, that can help you save time. I can also have many lines inside here and stack them together, although that does get a little finicky sometimes. And sometimes it's easier just to have each rib be its own separate line. But if you've got a complex pattern, it can be fairly easy to draw that out inside your part. And I'm just going to do this freehand just to show you that we can have different kind of setups here. And the line tool assumes that I want to add all these together, but I don't. Right. So very simple geometry going, or fairly complicated geometry going fast. And you say, well, what if you wanted this line to go all the way across? Just make sure the line goes past the other line. So if I come over to here and I edit this rib, and I probably don't want it to be at an angle because that looks bad, right? You can control how it resolves just by whether or not you have those intersections. Ooh, wrong button. Now you do want to specify, you still want those lines to be fully defined. So where they are is important, but again, the endpoints are not that important except for determining where they're going to cross. One of the disadvantages of the rib is that you'll note that I don't have any options for where it starts or where it ends because it's just going to fill in the backspace. But if you want that rib to start someplace besides the top plane, it's very easy to go in and make a reference plane that is somewhere offset from the original part. Waiting for SolidWorks to respond. So I can put this into my part some amount. So say it goes in like an inch. And then even after the fact on that sketch, when I roll back out, I can move the plane of the sketch. And that edit sketch plane is a very useful tool to be able to modify things. So I can move that sketch plane from that first face down to my new plane 1. And now I have that rib starting at the bottom. They also don't need to be flat. They can be at an angle. So if I want these ribs to go off in a different direction, so say I want to make a rib that goes off at an angle halfway through this part, I could go into my Actually, the front plane won't work very well because it'll be, well, we just use it. I can make this on any plane I wanted to. I'm going to change my view type so I can actually see the interior geometry a little bit. So I'm going to use a hidden line view. And I can make my rib, say it goes like that at an angle. Again, as long as I get the direction defined appropriately, I can't have it come out of the part. It's got to go into the part. So I'll just flip the direction of the set. Where's my option for that? Click on the arrow. Oh, here, flip material side. Just going to fill that in. So again, if you have these kind of complex geometries, you can pull them out fairly quickly with the rib tool. It works pretty similar to a thin extrude. If you have a draft on a rib, then probably what you should be using is the thin extrude tool. So just like I had before, if I want to have, let me delete this one. If I want to have a rib like that, I got to unabsorb the whole thing. But I want there to be draft on these. You have two options. You can use the draft tool to add that in after the fact. So I can go back into here. Oh, keep getting back clicks the draft tool. And then I can click on the items that I want to draft. All these faces, basically. This is supposed to be the direction. Which is kind of a pain, right? I also have to find my neutral plane on here, which I think will be defined also by my selection on there. And it's going to add that draft to it, right? But that's a lot of extra work. So instead of doing that, probably what I would do is in my sketch, I would make sure I have all my lines actually going to the points where I want them to end up. And just adding those relations. And again, I would fully define each of these lines as well. And then when I extruded it, I would use the thin feature. I prefer a mid-plane, but use whatever geometry you need to get what you want out of it, right? And then you can add a draft to that extrude without having to add the draft tool after the fact. That makes sense? I didn't extrude all the way down. So if I did this with an extrude, I can just change this from blind to up to next. Let's do up to surface. Oh, I was drafting in instead of out, so they were getting too thin. It actually doesn't work because of the side surfaces I have here, but you get the idea. I guess that I'll just look at one other tool. If you have weird artifacts like that, and that's the only thing that's preventing you from getting what you want, you can delete them. So if I come into my face tools, there's an option to delete. Like it was never there.
I needed that like 3 days.
And a lot of times, actually, if you use the delete and patch, a lot of times you don't even need to specify all the things you want to delete. You just need to get one of them. So if I delete this top face, no, that doesn't work. But if you have like, so what's a common example of this? You've got like a tube, right? And you've got something going into the tube that's just like, it's interfering with it. You can just delete all the faces that are inside the tube and then you're done, right? Super easy fix. I don't recommend using that as part of a design intent pathway, because again, you're not defining things the way that you want them to be. You get these really complicated, messy model trees. If I were to modify one of those things, it's going to be errors with that delete not being in the right spot. But if you're like so close to being done and that's the one thing you need to do to get it to work, do it. Yeah, it's fine. So delete face tool, pretty helpful. All right, we talked about ribs, we talked about drafts. Again, you can define the draft after the fact to any face you want to add an angle to. You just got to have the face you're angling and where you want the angle to start. The angle does not have to start at a part, like on the part anywhere. It can actually start up off of it. So if you want it to be wider, but most of the time communicating that geometry in any kind of a sketch is going to be super complicated. So it's usually going to start at the top or the bottom of the part where the draft is applied, right? So it's going to be obvious where that is. Shell tool, I'm actually going to go back earlier on here. So I made this part here using that cut extrude, but the shell tool is probably a lot more common on CSWA. And in fact, you probably would want to do this before you added the rounds, just because when you shell rounded corners, a lot of times that gives you errors because it has to merge that down, and so you can't shell thicker than the round, basically. If you guys want to see that error, you can do this. The important thing about the shell tool is it takes away any of the faces you select. So if I select the two side faces like this, then I'm going to make this thicker so we can see a little better. We're going to have an open part. If I want to make a tube, I can select two opposite faces. Now it's open all the way through. Okay. So the shell tool is not just for making a, an empty, clamshell kind of shape. You can use it to make almost any shape you want. In fact, one of the common shapes you might see is something that looks a little bit like that, right? Again, a very easy way of making those geometries if you need a thickness. Now, if I was given that, I would probably just draw the C and use a thin extrude to get that geometry. But there may be, more complexity there that I need, like say angled at the sides or something, that hollowing out that centerpiece is difficult to do kind of as part of the extrude that you're building out, right? Or you're doing it as part of a revolve and you've got just a section that needs to be pulled out. You don't have to do this on just prismatic geometries. The other thing that you're probably likely to see is having different thicknesses. So say I have this C here, but I want the back wall to be thicker. I can use this multi-thickness option, click on that back wall, and then I can make that thickness on that wall, whatever I want. Right? And I can do that to have that out. I don't know if there's a way to specify that you want to have different thicknesses across multiple different walls. I think you can only do one at a time. It's a good question though. So say I didn't have this face on here. Yeah, it looks like I only use one different thickness, but you can use that to control and make some interesting geometries fairly quickly. Questions on the shell tool? Pretty straightforward. The next thing is wrap. Wrap is a little bit finicky, but it allows you to cut into or out from a cylindrical surface. So I'm going to start by making a new part just because I don't have a cylinder on here. And so if I have just a circle, and I'm going to say it has a diameter of say 5 inches, and I'll make it 10 inches tall. Again, I'm just having this so I have a part to work on. Say I want to write my name, or I want to engrave my name along the perimeter of that circle, or you want to put Coca-Cola or something on there, right? What I can do is I can go back into a plane that is kind of where you can see that surface, and I can sketch on there. So I'm going to sketch on this top plane, and just because I'm a little bit vain, I'm going to go ahead and just write Derek Lura. I want to make it bold, and I'll put it right there. That's way too small. So I'm going to use my custom font, and I'll make my name big. It's like 1 inch tall. And now what I can do is I can wrap that onto this and cut it in or extrude it out. So I'll accept that one, and I'm going to click on the wrap tool. Pretty easy. Do you want to emboss? Do do you want to engrave, or do you just want to project? So if you just want to do like a surface cut, so you can apply like a different material or a different color to a face, you can do that, right? Like say you just want to make a Coca-Cola label, then that works fine. In this case, I want to have it pull out. So the thing that I'm extruding out is the sketch. The face I'm doing it onto is that one. And you can see that this yellow perimeter on here, that's how big that face is if you were to pull it straight out. So when you're using this tool, just make sure that your sketch fits inside that yellow rectangle. If it doesn't, it's not going to wrap properly. It's not going to look good. Then obviously, how far out do you want it to go, or how far in do you want it to go? And should get some nice lettering. I was talking with Krishana about this the other day. I don't know why, but it doesn't let you do wraps onto faces. So you can't use this to get like an exact, just the lettering itself. But you can do it on the cylinder and then cut the cylinder out to get just that kind of rounded shell if you wanted to. You could probably also do it with just making the shell and then cutting out the other geometry, which works fine. I guess one thing to note is that you can't use wrap for thin extrudes. It doesn't have all the options of the kind of extrude boss base revolve tools. So you are a little bit limited as to what geometry you can do. It doesn't have drafts. So if you want that to come up at an angle, that's going to cause a different issue. But again, allows you to get some pretty complicated geometry pretty easily, mostly used for decorative features. But sometimes, you just need, like, I need to add a rib to a section of my bar that's at some kind of weird angle or something. And I can't get what I want by using a sweep or a revolve. So you do that. Does that make sense? Intersections, mostly when we're using cuts, you can use this to get projections onto different parts. So I don't want to use the wrap. So I can just look at the different planes, right? And I can intersect those two pieces, and you can look and see where those two parts go across, and you have the different regions. Most of the time, if I'm going to do this, I'm using this with body options, and I'm going to use split, which works fairly similar. It's just kind of what do you want to do with those parts. So to show you guys the split tool. Oh, I'm in the wrong option. Commands. So the split tool, you have any surface or any face really that you want, and then a body, and you just cut the part in half. Now I've got two bodies, and you decide which one you want to keep. Or you can just delete the bodies after the fact. Now you've got a cut part. This is super useful if you just want to cut sections of a part off using a reference plane. So if I have something like this guy here, and I want to cut off an angle, or I want to cut off, say a circle or something. I'm not coming up with good examples because all of these would be more easily achieved with just using a cut extrude, but let's just do one for the sake of showing you how you can do it. So on here, really what I'd probably do with this is I would just do an extruded cut. And you could do something like that. But if you had a face and you wanted to do a cut that was more complex, or that didn't work for some reason, maybe because you only want to do it through a section of the part, I don't know, there's reasons that you wouldn't want to do this. What I can do is, rather than doing the extrude cut, is I can actually use these sketches to make faces. So I can do insert face, or sorry, surface, extrude. I can extrude that face out. And then I can use the split tool with those faces or those surfaces to cut the bodies. Yeah, cut them. I don't know why I was complaining. It was just complaining about something. And then I can go through and I can say, okay, which of these do I want to keep? I can just hide or show. And maybe you want to do that because you want to keep both sides of the part, so that way you can use them for a mold or something later on. And again, these surfaces, they don't do anything. They have no thickness. So if you're not using them, just hide them. You can also delete them after the fact. And it's important to note that when you delete a body or a surface, it doesn't delete it from the model tree. It just uses the delete function in the feature window. And so you can always roll back those deletions very easily, right? Which is helpful because you don't have to worry about, well, I deleted it, I used that for another thing. It's not gone, right? It's still being used for all the subsequent operations, or all the previous operations, I should say. So, questions on intersection surfaces? Again, you can split combine all these different parts. One of the things that you'll probably see that can create issues is where you want to create mirrors and the mirrors aren't working. So for instance, this geometry I have right here, let's find out. If I try and mirror this in some strange way, like say I have this part, I want to mirror it across this base, mirroring this part might get complicated. So, you know, which features do I include, which ones do I not exclude? And so when you get to fairly complicated geometries and you want to mirror them, I usually suggest you use a body mirror. And that'll more easily copy the geometry that you have. So if I click on the bodies to mirror, and then I can come to my solid bodies and I can click on that split piece, that's just going to mirror that body and not the features used to create it. And that's going to allow me to kind of use some more complicated parts. Now I can merge those right off the bat to make a different part, or I can leave them unmerged and then combine them together. A lot of the times, if you have something that you want to mirror, but you want to have some gap between those parts, it's not going to let you merge them together, and it's going to throw you an error at you. So if I undo that real quick, just leave that part. And I make a reference geometry that's offset from this part. Like say I want to have these two pieces, but I don't want them touching each other. Let's do, yeah, that's fine. I can mirror that body. Right, and again, if I click on the body as using my control options before I click on the mirror, then it knows I want to do a body. Again, I can't merge these together. If I try and click them, error, because they're not touching each other. But if I don't have them merged and I have the two bodies, and then I can connect them together using, you know, whatever I want. So I can sketch on this front plane. I can draw whatever connection that I want between these two parts. Let's say I want to use a center point slot. Let's do up to next. I can merge those two together like that. And now I have one solid body because that extrude is merging with the two bodies that it went out to, right? You can also just merge them using the combine tool if you've got a third body that's bridging those after the fact. Again, you guys just kind of seeing how we can make some very complicated geometry without using a whole lot of tools, even though we've got kind of a messy model tree at that point. Yeah.
If you didn't merge and solve on the center point slot, what would it give you, like 3 bodies, or would it merge with one slot?
Yeah, so if I unclick merge, now I've got 3 bodies, right? So I've got the mirror and the boss extrude, and I could just combine those together after the fact.
Right.
But again, if you're going to be doing that just like that, then why did you bother doing unclicking the merge, right? But if you wanted to like mirror or pattern that piece, then you could do that, right? Like you could just pattern just that body and then merge them to get whatever you wanted. And sometimes, so I'll give you guys an example. If I come back to this, where's that revolve part that I had? So I'm gonna go back before I split this up. Say I wanted to have a bunch of spokes coming off of this. So I go to my front, or let's go to the top plane, and I define a spoke like that, and I extrude it out. Say it goes out 10 inches, sure. And I want to pattern that. Oh, wrong. I want to do that as the face. There we go. Sometimes, again, this may bite me in the foot just doing things off the bat. If you have overlapping geometry like that, it let me do it. Sometimes it doesn't let you do it. because the geometry doesn't like line up nicely, probably because that's a circle, it's super easy. But if you have something like that where it won't let you copy it, what you can do is make that first part a body. So I can do edit feature, unmerge the result, and then pattern the body. Actually, you can't change it from a feature pattern to a body pattern, so I actually have to delete it and redo it. And this would work for linear patterns too. And I just want to do bodies. Now I've got all those extra bodies, I can just merge those together after the fact, right? So if you're trying to use a mirror or a pattern and it's not letting you do what you want to do, change your geometry to make the thing you're trying to mirror, either the whole part or just a subset of that, a separate body, do the pattern or the mirror with that body, and then merge them back together after the fact. And then that allows you to get to, again, more complex geometry faster. Any questions on any of these tools up here? I didn't cover reference geometry in the CSWA review, but the reference geometry is pretty straightforward. You just got to define how you want it to be defined. So usually it's some kind of offset or offset and an angle, but you have plane, point, line, axis. Those are just whenever you want something to help you define the position of other objects inside the part. They're typically not used to make the parts themselves, although you can use things like offset planes to do cuts using the split tool, like we talked about before. And you can make fairly complicated parts doing stuff like that. So if I unhide my split, and then I could split this again. You notice I have a ton of bodies now. So that's the only one that actually got cut because the other one I selected, right? But you could merge and combine those in all kinds of crazy ways. So I could have like every other part got cut or something. So I can show you guys what that would look like. So we'll keep that guy, that guy, that guy, that guy, that guy, right? And now I can say, okay, well, the ones I want to throw away are the top pieces. Oh, wait. I got the wrong, when I hit delete, I got the wrong thing. I don't want to delete the pattern instance. I just want to delete the body. Yeah. Pressing delete key sometimes doesn't work, I guess. Because it didn't give me the feature to delete the body. It just tried to delete the feature that I had selected. So if it doesn't let you do what you want, try using the right click menu, I guess. All right, and you can go through and get really weird shapes and stuff like that using those different combinations. And again, once I have the geometry I want, I could fuse all that back down to one part. If you're doing this for 3D printing, make sure you do fuse back down to one part before you're done. But like if you want to do like multi-material printing, like you wanted the top half to be black and the bottom half to be yellow or something like that, then that is partly how you would do that. You would cut that part into multiple bodies, save those bodies as separate STL files, and then put them in the printer and align them together. And since they came from the same part, their origins are the same. So aligning them should be just setting them to the same starting point, right? So that's usually pretty easy. Other questions on parts? All right. Anyone else have important tips that they want to share with the class? I guess. Yeah. Yeah, I was going to do assembly next. Yeah. Sorry. I'm just going to stop recording.